So here we're looking at our second reading, Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen document that was adopted by the National Assembly of France, beginning of the French Revolution. I'm certainly no expert in the history of the French Revolution or the history of this document, but I recognize its importance. And what I'd like to do in all of these videos is, number one, give you a sense of why I chose the document. That is, what is it about this document that is most essential to me that caused me to ask you to read it. I did that with Kant, and I'd like to do it here. And of course, this is a very wide-ranging document, but I think that there's one article in this document that, to me, has the most contemporary relevance, and it's number 4 here, where it says that political liberty consists in the power of doing whatever does not injure another. The exercise of the natural rights of every man has no other limits than those which are necessary to secure to every other man the free exercise of the same rights. And these limits are determinable only by the law. This seems to me to be an incredibly important statement in terms of how we modern people think of life, social life, and think of our freedom, and think of what it means to act responsibly. And what I mean here is that we feel that we can do whatever we want and should be free to do whatever we want as long as it doesn't harm anybody else. Here, that principle, which may be called the harm principle, is a specifically political one. That is, you should be free to. You should not be prevented from doing anything which cannot be shown to harm anyone else. And that's a pretty amazing principle, really, and something very new. I mean, the notion that people should be free to do anything that they want, the only limit being whether it harms anybody else, is really quite astoundingly new idea. People never really thought that way before. That is the notion that, well, people need to be able to make up their own minds. You can see the connection here with Kant about how they want to live, and they should be free to live that out, to live out their principles and live out their notions. It's very similar to the American idea in the Declaration of Independence of the pursuit of happiness, that everyone should be free to determine that for themselves, and that's an essential part of human happiness, that is to have that freedom of self-determination, and that the only limit to that is if it hurts somebody else. That's where you run into the boundaries of your own freedom, your own legitimate freedom, is if in the exercise of that freedom you would be injuring someone else. That's when we have to draw limits. I don't think there's any more important idea than that in modern life. The idea that the individual is sovereign, or the individual is autonomous, or the individual is self-directing, and needs to be allowed that freedom to experiment in their life and to live according to their own principles and wishes, as far as that's possible. And the limits of possibility are when that begins to harm or injure someone else. Now then we can talk about, well, what does that mean? Injure someone else, just physically injure or curtail their rights, is really the idea here, is that once the exercise of my rights starts to limit your exercise of your rights, that's when disputes happen. But there's all sorts of what does injury consist of? So it doesn't solve every problem, but the principle, I think, is an incredibly important one and really defines modern societies. This idea that people need to be free to do whatever the heck they want. The only limits there to what is illegitimate action is what would harm another. I don't think there's any more central principle that really defines modern societies than this.